I'd like to talk to you today about one of the most interesting stories in the Bible, and that is Moses and the 10 plagues on Egypt and Pharaoh in order for him to let the Israelites go out of slavery. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in this. Could God have done it in one act? Sure. But he was trying to make a display of his uniqueness and power to prove that he was the one true God. But also, he was taking a direct shot at the false gods that Egypt was worshiping instead of him. I'll show you what I mean. First, Moses was called to turn the Nile River, the water in it, into blood. And he did it for 7 days. But Pharaoh's sorcerers could replicate that. They turned water into blood as well. So what happens next? Moses gets a plague of frogs. Well, first of all, let me say that was taking a shot at Hapi, which is the god of the Nile for the Egyptians. Now you have a plague of frogs. Well, and this was a direct shot at Heket, which was the frog goddess god in Egyptian lore. Another one being worshipped. Well, the sorcerers could also replicate that, but Moses was the only one to be able to stop it. Okay, and now we have a little separation. We got where Moses turns the dust into lice. This was taking a shot at Geb, which was one of their gods of creation, god of the dust. Well, what's interesting about this plague, which created a lot of discomfort, the sorcerers of Pharaoh weren't able to duplicate this one, so they admitted themselves this is the finger of God. And this was the last plague that needed Aaron's involvement. Now things pick up a little bit. Now we have the flies plague. This was a shot at Khepri. Now, these shots at the gods that Egypt was worshiping, some of them are at multiple gods. I'm just giving you one of the main ones, but they all are going up in power rank for the Egyptians. So Khepri, one of the fly gods, Uachit was another one. But this plague specifically created destruction and discomfort, but it also separated itself from affecting the Israelites and the Egyptians. Only the Egyptians were hit by this, which is kind of a big point when it talks about, basically says that God is going to protect his people. Now we get into the livestock pestilence, which was taking a shot at the Egyptian god Hathor. Okay. What happened with this one is Pharaoh actually got a warning this time. In order to repent, still didn't repent. So now we've got sickness and disease going through all their livestock. Again, just hitting the Egyptians. Okay. Now it gets bigger. Now, in the 6th plague, we are talking about boils. And this was unannounced. God's getting fed up a little bit. And each time he's hardening Pharaoh's heart and he's saying, yeah, we'll go, take away the plague, and then keeps on changing his mind. Okay. With the boils taking a shot at Isis, here's what went down. Moses picked up the ashes from the furnace of affliction, threw them into the air. Those ashes hit the Egyptians and became boils. What that did, not only extreme pain, extreme sickness, but it made it so that Pharaoh's own priests, his own sorcerers, were unclean to perform any rituals, which is it's a big deal. Now you have the hail, the massive hail, taking a shot at Nut, the goddess of the sky. Well, this one, another warning was given, not heeded, but these massive hail that turned into fire and exploded when they hit, they didn't take out the food source. They were hitting mostly the flax and barley crops. The reason why that's important is because those were the crops for the clothing and libations that just made the Egyptians' life more comfortable. Now we get bigger. Now it gets into the locust. Now this is a lot bigger. Locust is a shot at Seth. Okay? Now, with the locust, it destroyed the rest of the crops. Okay? It was hitting all their food source, which basically is a forewarning of what's going down. So when it hits their food source and the Egyptians are scared of death, basically, or the thought of death, it's getting to that point, okay? But still, Pharaoh wouldn't let it go down. Okay, now we're talking about the 9th plague, which is darkness. Unspeakable darkness for 3 days. This was a foretelling of the hopelessness, death, destruction that would come for Egypt, for holding God's people. This was a shot at Ra, the sun god, who was the most worshipped entity in Egyptian culture other than Pharaoh himself. And again, needed one more. Well, the 10th plague was the killing of the firstborn, which was a shot at Pharaoh himself, the most worshipped person in Egypt, who thought himself to be the son of Ra. Now, what's crazy about this one is that Pharaoh bargained that, listen, you can leave, but you can't take the animals. Well, the Israelites needed the animals for sacrifice. And when Moses said that's not going to play, Moses basically called it on himself. Called his own death coming. We'll bring it on, basically. What this did is it called the Israelites to an active obedience. Okay? And what we celebrate the Passover with. They put lamb's blood on their doorposts so that when the angel of death went through, he knew to pass over those doors, saving the Israelites, wiping out the Egyptians' firstborn. What's interesting about this is all the things represented here. You have the Passover, and then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is represented. Passover is represented by the hold up. What is it? I just lost it for a second. The law of sacrifice. I apologize. We have the law of sacrifice, which is represented by Passover, and then Feast of Unleavened Bread is represented by the law of the gospel, and then you have the law of the firstborn, which represents the law of consecration. Well, and if you're wondering still if these were directly aimed at gods of Egypt, he says it in Exodus 12:12. He says, and on all the gods of Egypt. He was taking a shot at the idols that had been put up instead of him. Okay, why is this important? Because not only when we put idols in front of God, not only does it make him incredibly upset because he's only trying to help his people, but he allows the people to become what they're worshiping. You are what you worship. You are what you eat. You've heard statements like that. Point is that when people worship a frog goddess, show them a frog. When people worship the sky, give them hail. He was taking shots and saying that when you put other idols and other gods in front of him, it will turn to destruction and you will take on characteristics of that god, so to speak. This is an amazing story in the Bible, and the 10 plagues, which represent 10 in the Bible, can represent completeness or wholeness, but also God's authority and law. God was showing that there are no other gods, that he is the only one, and he proved his point by delivering his people from Egypt in this scenario. I hope this explained this story a little better. Have a great day.